The first time Kael saw Xavier's scar, he dropped his nutrient tablet. They were seated across from each other in the shared lunch quadrant of the Interspecies Academic Initiative, a circular room suspended in low orbit above Earth. The Earth-side viewports shimmered with the blue and white swirl of the planet, but Kael's eyes were locked on the human's exposed forearm. "You are dying," Kael said, voice flat, hand reaching instinctively for the emergency transponder embedded in his wrist. "Remain upright. I will summon medical intervention." Xavier blinked. "What?" Kael pointed stiffly. "Your limb. The rupture across your dermis. The coloration. It is significant." Xavier followed the direction of the alien's long, narrow finger to the pale, jagged line that ran from elbow to wrist. It was old, nearly the same color as his skin now, but years of healing hadn't erased the uneven path it carved. "Oh, that?" Xavier rolled his sleeve down with a shrug. "It's an old souvenir." Kael froze. "A keepsake? From what mortal event?" Xavier chuckled. "Fell through a rusted fence when I was 12. Needed 15 stitches. Still can't feel much here." He tapped the area below his elbow. Kael's jaw tightened. "You survived a full dermal laceration. Without limb replacement. At 12 units of age." "Yeah. I mean, it hurt like hell. But I got ice cream after. So worth it." Kael didn't move for several seconds. Then, with mechanical slowness, he pressed his transponder and muttered into it, "Cancel emergency. Human remains functional. Injury is historical." He stared at Xavier as if he'd just admitted to walking away from a vaporization blast with only a mild sunburn. Xavier tilted his head. "You okay, man?" "I must reevaluate my biological risk assessments of your species," Kael said. They sat in silence for a while. Xavier continued eating his rehydrated beef cubes. Kael didn't touch his tablet. Later that day, Kael requested a private consultation with his species liaison, a pale green humanoid named Terex who had lived among humans for over a decade. "I believed I understood human physiology," Kael began, hands clasped tightly behind his back. "I was mistaken." Terex didn't look up from his data console. "You saw a scar?" "Yes. It was not subtle." Terex sighed. "Humans accumulate damage. They don't always repair it fully. They just get used to it." Kael frowned. "Is that safe?" "No. But they do it anyway." Kael took a moment to absorb that. "So this is normal? For them?" "Yes." The next week, Kael shadowed Xavier through a zero-gravity robotics lab, watching him tinker with a floating assembly drone. Midway through an adjustment, Xavier slipped off the rung of the lab scaffold and smashed his shoulder into the steel frame below. "Damn it." Kael flinched. "Are you compromised?" Xavier groaned as he climbed back up. "Think I just bruised it." "Not the first time." Kael's eyes narrowed. "You will allow a scan." "I'm fine." "Scan. Or I will notify your superior." Xavier huffed but allowed Kael to wave his portable biosensor over the shoulder. The device beeped and projected a small holographic readout. "No fractures," Kael confirmed. "Significant soft tissue compression. You will be immobilized for 2 cycles." Xavier shrugged with his good arm. "I'll ice it. Be back tomorrow." "No. You will not." Kael stepped into Xavier's path and stared at him until the human relented and agreed to rest. The next day, Kael brought him a sling and set up a temporary station in the observation lounge so Xavier could still monitor the lab. "You really don't let things go, do you?" Xavier said, adjusting the sling. "I do not understand how you do," Kael replied. Xavier grinned. "We're stubborn. Comes with the territory." That night, Kael reviewed the incident log of the initiative. He cross-referenced it with medical reports from human participants. The results were staggering. Burns, broken fingers, concussions. One student had been admitted with a dislocated knee after a 0G basketball game, and almost none of them had withdrawn from the program. By the 3rd week, Kael had started compiling a personal file titled Human Recovery Patterns, illogical but statistically consistent. He confronted Xavier again after the latter returned from a 2-day absence with a fresh set of stitches near his eyebrow. "You have acquired another wound." "Yeah, slipped on some steps during the storm drills. You'd think we'd have better traction mats up there." Kael exhaled. And this too is a souvenir? Xavier laughed, then winced. Sure. Let's call it that. Kael stared at the bandage. You are accumulating them. Well, I'm not trying to. We just bounce back. Not as fast as we'd like, but enough. Kael wasn't convinced. Your species seems to treat injury with casual tolerance. Because if we didn't, we'd be too scared to do anything. Kael tilted his head. You would rather risk damage than avoid experience. Xavier leaned back in his chair. Pretty much. Later that month, on a joint field expedition to the Martian ice tunnels, Xavier and Kael were part of a 4-member team conducting subterranean scans. An unexpected tremor caused a partial collapse. Xavier shoved Kael out of the way as a jagged chunk of tunnel wall broke loose. He wasn't fast enough to avoid the falling rock himself. Xavier! Kael's voice echoed through the tunnel. Dust choked the air. Xavier lay crumpled, half covered in debris, his leg bent unnaturally. Kael dropped to his knees, pulled off his breather, and pressed his hand to Xavier's neck. Pulse detected. He is alive. Unconscious. Compound fracture probable. Kael activated the emergency beacon. It took 20 minutes for the rescue shuttle to arrive. Kael didn't move from Xavier's side. At the orbital infirmary, human medics confirmed a fractured femur and a cracked rib. Xavier required surgery and would need several weeks of recovery. Kael visited him during the first night. You are foolish, Kael said, sitting beside the human's bed. Xavier stirred, opened one eye. You're welcome. You should not have pushed me. I'm the one with bones. You're basically made of elastic wires. Kael's eyes narrowed. That is not anatomically accurate. Xavier gave a weak chuckle. Still, worth it. You will carry another scar. Guess I will. Kael reached into his satchel and pulled out a small data slate. I have compiled a list. All your injuries. Dates. Severity. Locations. Xavier blinked. You made me a chart of my own accidents. I needed to know if this pattern was isolated. It is not. You are consistent. Xavier smiled. Thanks, I think. Kael stood. Rest. I will return tomorrow. Over the next few weeks, Kael watched Xavier undergo physical therapy. Progress was slow. Pain was visible. But the human never complained. Instead, he joked with the nurses. Studied while doing stretches. Asked to be wheeled into the lab on day 15 so he could supervise a project remotely. By day 25, he took his first steps with crutches. Kael was there. You walk again. Xavier nodded. Not gracefully. But I'm getting there. You will have a permanent limp? Maybe. Depends how the bone sets. They're optimistic. Kael studied him. You will conceal this one, too? Under clothing? Probably. Why? Kael hesitated. You never mark them intentionally. Never keep record. But you call them souvenirs. Xavier leaned on his crutches, thoughtful. Because they're part of the trip. Kael considered that. Later that night, he updated his file. Note, human perception of scarring not rooted in shame or weakness. In some cases, scars are considered proof of endurance or experience. This outlook does not negate pain, but recontextualizes it. He paused, then added, conclusion, humans do not adapt because they are impervious. They adapt because they expect to be hurt and proceed anyway. He sat back, and for the first time since arriving on Earth orbit, Kael understood something fundamental. Not just about Xavier, but about the entire species. The first thing Xavier saw when he limped back into the robotics lab, crutches gone, favoring his right leg slightly, was Kael standing on a stool, dismantling the upper casing of a faulty calibration drone with surgical intensity. You trying to make me obsolete? Xavier leaned against the console, stretching his leg out carefully. Kael didn't look down. Your absence extended beyond projected recovery. I required occupation. I was gone 29 days. You had a countdown. 29 Earth rotations, Kael corrected. I logged each. Xavier let out a low whistle. You're really not good at hobbies, are you? I attempted knitting. You what? Kael twisted a cable free from the drone's neck. It was unsuccessful. The needles slipped through my digits. I also do not understand scarves. You're not alone on that one. Kael stepped down and gestured toward the bench. You should sit. The osteo repair is only partially fused. Overexertion will risk destabilization. Xavier raised an eyebrow. You reading my chart now? It was not encrypted. You hacked the infirmary? Kael blinked. I accessed it. That is not the same. You're impossible. You were fragile. Xavier grinned and sat cautiously. And yet here I am. Kael handed him a small tool. You left this behind. Xavier turned it over in his fingers. Where'd you find it? Inside the wall joint of the secondary console. It had become embedded during the last tremor. Figures. That thing vanished mid-debug. I thought I hallucinated it. I scanned for anomalies in electromagnetic signatures. It was lodged behind a thermal relay. Xavier leaned back, impressed. You really went full bloodhound on a screwdriver. It is not a screwdriver. It is a torque spanner hybrid with custom grip calibration. Still a screwdriver. Kael paused. You named tools incorrectly on purpose. Tradition. Kael's eyes narrowed. Is that why you named your repair drone, Meatball? No. That's because it kept falling off ledges. Kael looked mildly alarmed. Xavier stood slowly and walked toward the recharging dock, watching the same drone cycle through its power-up sequence. Looks like Meatball's still a little twitchy. You reroute the Euro stabilizer. I replaced the entire unit. It was misaligned. You do that all on your own? After reviewing over 97 hours of instructional footage, Xavier gave him a long look. You really don't like downtime. It causes existential drift. Fair. They worked in tandem for a while, calibrating the drone's new sensor array. The silence was comfortable, broken only by the occasional hum of diagnostic pulses. Eventually Xavier broke the quiet. You ever been injured? Kael's fingers paused. Not significantly. Never sprained anything? Cut yourself. I once compressed a digit in a pressure hatch. The dermal exterior split. It reclosed in under 4 minutes. For minutes. That's cheating. Kael tilted his head. You desire slower healing? I'd settle for faster. You know how long it takes us to regrow bone? Months. Even with stem grafts. I have studied the process. Your skeletal regeneration rate is inefficient. Don't I know it? Kael adjusted the drone's flight stabilizer, then leaned back. Your species continues to expand across multiple environments despite that inefficiency. We've got a thing about going places we shouldn't. Like subterranean tunnels during seismic instability? Exactly like that. Kael folded his arms. I reviewed the footage. Your decision to shield me lacked strategic merit. You were in the fall zone. I am constructed to absorb impact more efficiently than you. Still didn't seem right to watch you get pancaked. Kael was quiet for several seconds. You place moral weight above logistical probability. We call it instinct. The drone hovered between them, newly steady in the air. Kael watched it, then said, I ran simulations. If you had not intervened, the rock would have deflected off my shoulder plating. Maximum damage, surface abrasion. Your action increased your own risk. Yeah. That's kind of the point. I struggle to understand how that is logical. It's not. Kael considered this. And yet you persist in it. Welcome to human decision-making. Kael turned the drone off with a touch. It is inefficient. Illogical. Reckless. Xavier waited. Kael continued, and also strangely admirable. Xavier gave a half laugh. You just paid me a compliment. Do I need to document this? It is already logged in the official transcript of our joint field operations. Of course it is. A soft chime echoed from the corridor shift change alert. Kael stepped aside as another student, a tall, crystalline-bodied emissary from the Glavari cluster, entered and nodded a greeting. Kael responded with subtle hand signals, and the alien retreated to the far workbench without a word. Xavier watched. You're weirdly fluent in Glavari gestures. I observed their conversations for 85 hours. They communicate primarily through limb geometry. 85 hours? You know, you could have just asked them to teach you. That was not efficient. Xavier leaned back against the console. You ever take a shortcut? Kael blinked. Define shortcut. Doing something the easy way? Kael answered, that implies I recognize an easy way before attempting the difficult one. Xavier laughed. You really are one of us. Kael didn't respond immediately. Then I've wondered. About what? Whether I am evolving. Or merely assimilating. Xavier sobered a little. Does it bother you? I do not know yet. There was a long pause between them. Then Kael added, I attempted to construct a human-style joke. Would you like to hear it? Absolutely. Kael straightened. Why did the human ingest a carbonated beverage during atmospheric turbulence? No idea. To experience gastrointestinal distress in zero gravity. Xavier stared. That's not a joke. That's a horror story. Kael looked faintly pleased. Then I have captured the essence. Later, as Xavier packed up his toolkit, Kael watched him move. The limp was subtler now, but still present. Xavier paused, catching Kael's gaze. You keep looking at my leg like it's about to fall off. It might. I'm 6 weeks out of surgery. It's healing. You are 23 Earth rotations in age. That is young. You should not be this fractured. Xavier shrugged. Tell that to gravity. Kael stepped forward. There is a reinforcing brace available from the Zolari medtechs. It would stabilize your gait. I can request one. I appreciate it. But part of the deal is learning to walk again without extra scaffolding. Kael glanced at his own legs. I have never considered walking to be an achievement. You've never had to relearn it. Kael was quiet for a moment. Does it hurt? Less than it did. More than I'd like. And you continue anyway. Wouldn't be worth much if I didn't. Kael nodded slowly. I am beginning to understand the Souvenir. Xavier slung his bag over his shoulder. It's not about the scar. Kael's head tilted. No? It's about the fact that it healed. That I'm still here. That I can still move forward. Even if I limp. Kael turned that over in his mind. You measure time in recovery. Sometimes that's the only measure that counts. They walked out together, Kael adjusting his stride to match Xavier's slower pace. Neither said anything for a while. As they entered the corridor, Kael spoke again. I have never broken a structure in my body. Lucky you. But I have lost cohesion before. During a plasma leak on a mining moon. Xavier looked over. What happened? My outer mesh burned. I retained function, but was unable to regulate internal temperature. The pain was sufficient that I requested shutdown. But you didn't shut down. No. My supervisor refused. He said I was not expendable. Then I guess you've got your own kind of scars. Kael stopped walking. They are not visible. Doesn't mean they're not real. Kael stared at him. Then, without ceremony, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small, hexagonal data crystal. This contains my operational logs from the incident. If you wish to understand. Xavier accepted it. I'll take a look. Kael nodded once. Then we are even. They continued walking, side by side, down the corridor humming with distant machinery toward another day's noise, failures, and improbable successes. The hydroponic dome on Deck 13 was supposed to be off limits after dusk cycle, but Xavier had never been particular about signage. He limped past the inactive security drone, which chirped once and went back to sleep mode. The dome lights were dimmed to simulate twilight, casting a soft amber glow over the rows of bioluminescent vines curling around metal columns. Kael was already there, kneeling beside a trough of soil, hands sheathed in sanitized mesh gloves. He was very carefully separating a cluster of sprouting earth beans from an invasive fungal root that had crawled in from the Glavari samples 2 plots down. You're not cleared for heavy bending, Xavier said as he walked into the enclosure. I am not bending. I am crouching, Kael replied without turning. Fantastic. Your spine's a semanticist. I am nearly done. The foreign root is encircling the irrigation nodes. Xavier lowered himself onto a bench with a grunt. You could have called the agribots. They overwater. This requires nuance. You're starting to sound like Nora. Nora is competent. She also talks to the tomatoes. Kael stood, holding a fistful of tangled root matter in one hand. They are sensitive to vocal vibrations. She is not mistaken. Xavier watched him as he dropped the mess into a containment bin. I didn't expect you to be into gardening. Kael removed one glove and peeled a bit of soil off his wrist joint. I find the structure of cultivation satisfying. There is a clear cause and effect. A sequence. You tend and something grows. You ever grow anything before coming here? Only mold. Accidentally. Xavier laughed, then winced and rubbed his thigh. You're right. I shouldn't be walking this much. You left physical therapy 2 days early. This is predictable. I was sick of being lectured by a floating box. Kael picked up a watering can with an unnecessary flourish. The box was correct. Xavier leaned back against the wall. You always follow orders that precisely? I follow logic. Orders are only useful if they align. Fair. How's your recalibration project going? I completed the drone stabilization module yesterday. It passed turbulence testing. You mean Meatball didn't crash? It collided with a wall, but upright. That qualifies as success. They were quiet for a moment. The vines overhead shimmered faintly, reacting to the temperature shift in the room. Xavier tilted his head. You ever think about staying? Kael looked up. In the dome? On Earth? Or in orbit? After the program ends, I am contracted for 6 more cycles. That's not what I asked. Kael rinsed his gloves in the sterilizing sink. My species does not emigrate. We rotate assignments. Permanent placement is rare. Would you want to if it wasn't rare? Kael dried his hands slowly. You ask questions that suggest permanence. It's not a trap. Kael returned to the bench and sat beside him, careful not to let his elbow brush Xavier's. I do not dislike it here. High praise. I find the unpredictability of your kind less frustrating than before. That's practically affection. Kael looked at him sideways. You make this difficult. That's what we do. Kael folded his hands. Your limp has improved. I've been cheating. Used the hydro tank for resistance work. Less strain. You did not report that. Didn't know I had to. You were part of a monitored recovery protocol. I'm also part of the I want to sleep through the night without pain protocol. Kael didn't argue. Your gait has stabilized. Still stiff in the morning. That is consistent with your injury. Xavier flexed his foot absently. I'll get there. Kael didn't respond immediately. Then I reviewed your field notes during your absence. You read my logs? They were submitted to the communal archive. You went digging. They were poorly encrypted. Xavier stared at him. You're a menace. You described the collapse in significant detail, but not your own injury. Xavier shrugged. Didn't seem relevant. You described the color of the dust. Yeah, it was weirdly red, and yet not the pain, or your fear, because it's not a drama piece. It's a report. Kael was quiet for a few seconds. You left out half the experience. I didn't think anyone would care. I care. Xavier looked over. Why? I need to understand. What's left to understand? Why you didn't retreat when you had the option. I didn't want to leave you pinned. You could have summoned help. There wasn't time. You gambled. I chose. Kael folded his arms. And if the outcome had been worse? Then I'd still rather have done it. That is not logical. No. It's human. Kael looked down at his hands. I have never made a decision that placed another's life above my own functionality. Not without instruction. Maybe you haven't had a reason to. Perhaps. The room fell into a long silence, broken only by the slow drip of condensation into the root basins. Eventually Kael said, I requested reassignment. To the Earth Orbital Division. Xavier sat up straighter. You did. It is not guaranteed. But you want to? I believe there is more to learn here than I had anticipated. Xavier gave a half smile. That's probably the best compliment we're ever going to get from you. I have also submitted a secondary proposal for a joint research module. Human and non-human resilience patterns in post-traumatic recovery. Xavier blinked. That's a mouthful. It is accurate. I'm in. I did not yet ask. You don't have to. Kael nodded once. Then we are partners. Again. Kael stood and reached into a side pouch, pulling out a small rectangular object. I constructed this. For your leg. Xavier took it carefully. It was a custom-fit brace, sleek, with vented joints and what looked like a reactive alignment strip along the side. This is way better than the clinic default. It adjusts to your stride in real time. Why didn't you give me this earlier? It was not finished. Xavier tested the hinges. This is incredible. It is not decorative. No, it's perfect. Kael looked away. I wanted to make something that would help you move forward. Xavier fastened it around his knee, adjusted the strap, and stood. The brace clicked softly, then hummed as it adapted to his weight. He took a step, then another. No pulling, no resistance. Kael watched him. It will compensate but not replace. You must still move. I know. They walked together out of the dome, the artificial night slowly giving way to the pale simulated dawn in the corridor beyond. Xavier glanced at Kael. You ever miss home? Not yet. That'll change. I hope so. They reached the lift. Kael pressed the button. Xavier flexed his leg again. Feels like cheating. It is not. Still feels like it. Kael looked at him. You earned your limp. This only helps you walk with it. The doors opened. They stepped inside. The lift rose. No more was said. Everything that needed to be understood already had been.